So that's part of the mission, Christian. The main motto I live by is money is only a marker to the amount of value you provide to your clients.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of The Flight Path, SDI's podcast on everything uncrewed technologies. I'm here with the regular gang. We got Steve, we got James, we got Don. How you guys doing?
Fantastic.
Real good.
Well, you are now a Mr. James. You got married over last week. Congratulations.
Yeah, well said and done. Thank you, good sir.
We'll have to
you're the
keep all the ladies off you at the booth from now on, so.
Enough about me, guys. Let's get on to someone a lot more special than me on this one.
He's shy. Don, Steve, how's your week go? Anything exciting?
Nothing too particularly exciting, other than the weather's cooling down, so that's nice. It's not 100 degrees outside, but yeah, work is going good. Just loving what I'm doing.
Cool.
Oh, well, the typical.
We do have an exciting. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say it's the typical for me. I don't know when this is going to come out, but I just got back from a vacation out for a week with no internet, and I did the right thing and did no email checking at all. Totally worth it, but paying the price.
Hey, you need to decompress sometimes, and so somebody who knows that he needs to decompress is our next guest. He is busier than all get out. So. Little introduction. Some people fly drones to map farmland. Others use them for inspection work. But today's guest, he straps on a pressure washer and sends drones into battle against rooftops, solar panels, and industrial grime. He's known around the industry as the Grime boss. But now he's bringing that same energy to his role at Aero Velocity. Everybody, please welcome John Hooks, Director of Business Development for Aero Velocity.
Welcome, John.
Woo!
Thank you for the introduction, Christian. It's a pleasure to be here. Very happy we are collaborating, and the industry's changing very quickly. It's been quite a journey, and I look forward to getting into this. So, ready to start whenever you are.
Yeah, well, tell us a little bit about who you are, your background, what you do for Aero Velocity, all the good stuff.
So, a little bit of background predating Aero Velocity and how I got into this space. So I was in occupational health and safety before this on the medical treatment side whenever I was around 18 to 20 years old. Handled injury treatments, things like that for industrial, accidents, minor stuff. Did audiology testing and things like that, and eventually helped start writing, SOPs and keeping companies in compliance. While I was doing that, I was in school in pre-med to actually become a doctor. I wanted to be an endocrinologist until a friend of mine came along and wanted to start a drone business. And I, of course, got very googly-eyed at that. In high school, I had a little DJI Spark and, a free fly Movi M5 gimbal. So, we would kind of play around with that stuff. So I was semi-familiar with it. And, I invested in the business. I took the leap, and, we started with just, construction progress monitoring, photography, videography stuff, more real estate, kind of the surface level entry stuff. And then that was early 2023, about mid 2023, that side of the business was doing fairly okay. I was doing the business development as well as flying. We were a very small team at that time, but we had saw a video of a pressure washing drone and we got really curious. So we actually rented a pressure washing drone, and well, with no experience in cleaning or larger platforms like that, it went about as expected. So we regrouped a bit. We purchased our own drone and we took delivery of it in August of 2023, and we started partnering with local cleaners to fulfill anything really above 2 and 3 story jobs, and that was really laying the runway for massive developments in this industry. That drone was the number 6 model of that aircraft. And I believe here in 2025, there's well over 250 of them out cleaning internationally right now, not to mention all of the other brands. So came in at the ground level for that, but pretty much from the time of August until early 2024, around April, flying projects, doing everything from pilot staffing to full service cleaning. A lot of very big, very notable jobs in that time frame, and it was all discovery. So nobody really had pricing dialed in or anything like that. So not only was it in uncharted territory from the service perspective, but also the aviation perspective of it and the pricing perspective. And it was great to learn that. I met a lot of people, made a lot of great partners in that time frame. And in May of 2024, I joined Liberty Drones as a business development executive with Eric Schultz as the founder of that organization. And we had a very different model in mind. We wanted to ensure that the individuals who were buying equipment and setting up these businesses had enough work to support them, because that was a common trend we saw in the drone cleaning space. Was people would spend $150,000 on this equipment and not understand the sales process or have any jobs to be able to support that business and that operation. I think everybody in the beginning thought it was a lot cheaper to run something and start something like this, and it's just not. It's a very expensive service line to be offering, and it's bridging. It's very difficult as well, because you're in close proximity to buildings. You're bridging the gap of commercial cleaning and UAVs. So two very different industries, two very different worlds coming together. And at the end of the day, the client expects their building to be clean. And, we want to bring safer solutions to be able to do that. And we were fortunate enough to have an abundance of jobs, but not a lot of equipment. And we had plenty of contractors under our belt to be able to fulfill those. And we were able to record a lot of media from that. And those are individuals who came to us not only wanting to purchase equipment, but also purchased consulting from us, which included sales trips and things like that for them. And a few of those ground level people I've actually brought on the team, brought here to Aero Velocity very recently, which is just a great feeling. It's every business owner's dream to sell their business, make a good chunk of cash, and move on to the next thing. But these guys ended up loving it. We have an absolute A1 team. So, sticking by the people that were there with us from the very beginning. So fast forward into late 2024, I went to the UK actually for a few weeks during that time to start to pioneer drone cleaning there, and learning a little bit about the market, being there for that few weeks, meeting some other drone manufacturers that had been in other spaces, such as precision coatings, that were looking to bridge into cleaning, as well as navigating CAA regulations for, your OSCs to be able to get an authorization. Was definitely an interesting learning curve. We had a large European clientele at that point, so it was important that I went over there and really started to learn hands-on. Came back for Christmas and actually went back in mid-January and stayed for about 3 months in Cambridge this year, and did everything. I actually cleaned the very first building in central London with a drone over a canal. Not a ton of media from that. It was very, very stressful because we had gotten our authorization at that point, and we had footpaths, and then we had to roll equipment in on trolleys, like the tanks and everything. So I had to roll them like half a mile. It was ridiculous. But we got it done. It looked beautiful. The building had no other way of being cleaned. Rope access was not allowed. And, there's a river on the backside of it, so you can't get a lift there.
And you got good cardio in, So
Oh
that's
yeah,
the most
to say
important
the
part.
least, it was tough.
Okay.
Staying during that time, did a lot of business development there, met with a lot of facilities managers, inspected a lot of properties, quoted them out, got the opportunity to go to some incredible places, and eventually, in the later weeks of being there, I was finishing up an NHS trust hospital in Liverpool. So we had, bridged into doing NHS work in these all glass, primarily all glass facades. And, not only that, but we had actually switched platforms during that time as well. So we had to completely go through the authorization process. It wasn't as easy as an amendment, which it should have been, but the CAA wasn't as nice about it. And it's aircraft specific with an operational safety case. So we had to go very far out of our way to prove hose tensile strength and all of these different very bizarre metrics that we typically would not have to measure here in the US. And that really helped me understand the process a lot more and to navigate that European market. And we really set the stage of what's going to be in that market as well. But knowing how tight the restrictions are here, at the end of that trip, I got an offer from Aero Velocity. I was planning on coming back fairly soon anyway. This is early April timeframe of 2025. And I joined Aero Velocity as a senior manager for field operations, primarily ensuring that these commercial and industrial jobs are done up to standard. And I am. It's a blessing and a curse at the same time because I hold a lot of proprietary knowledge on these processes, and there's some things that are streamlined and other things that are not so much. So it was a challenge. We did 3 large temples. I can't say a whole lot about them early then, and they came out absolutely beautiful. Hardest of the hard, full limestone. And I actually just went and looked at one last week that we had done, and it's beautifully clean to this day. So, turned a 167-foot steeple with a 100-foot temple, from taking weeks to clean, we did it in about 3 days.
Jeez.
And
How long would that usually take somebody to do by hand? Did they tell you like what's the efficiency?
Couple of weeks. So it would traditionally be done via lifts. We actually didn't even have a single lift on site for any of those. All 3 of them were traditionally done that way. We didn't have anybody on ladders. We didn't have anyone on lifts. And, they came out beautiful. They still look good. And we're actually ending up doing a lot more of them now. So we proved it. In the interim until about July, we were doing smaller projects, demos, things like that, in-house training, working on getting the internal team more familiar with cleaning powered by drones is how I like to say it. The drone is a tool in the toolbox. So we're also kind of deciding where exactly we wanted to go with those service offerings. Do we want to primarily be a service provider on that front? Do we want to do more consulting? Do we want to do more manufacturing and development? And we chose all of the above. So come July, we had a very special project come up, St. John's Resort in Plymouth, Michigan. The LIV Golf Championship was in mid-August. And this was the kind of project that it was an absolute monolith. And it was a monolith with about 1 week of heads up. The facility manager and building engineer reached out to me on LinkedIn and, took it from there, absolutely dropped everything, went and got that done. And we cleaned this entire facility, top to bottom, roofs, facades, windows, as well as provided a full 3D digital twin. We did 2.5 millimeter accuracy. The deliverable we provided to them was 1 centimeter accuracy of the entire property. And we also did an MSI, a multispectral scan of their golf course to gauge vegetation health, preemptive to the tournament coming up. So they had a nice report from that one. And we did all of that in 12 days. So
that's highly impressive for a full service sweep like that, not just the washing, but being able to get the data, the model, the map together, doing the work in the field. Same thing with the multispectral. Holy cow, you guys move fast. That's
James,
impressive.
James,
thank you, James.
James, explain to our viewers like what makes that so impressive with all that.
Well, it makes it impressive because it can take days just to get enough data points on a normal, like if you're dealing with traditional in situ style, like mapping and collection on the ground, that can take days just to get those mapping points. And even then you're just left with a dense point cloud. I mean, what was the team size that you were working with on that project, John?
Yeah, so I'll get to that, James. I'll add icing on the cake even further. We actually flew our Alta X with our yellow scan Voyager as well. So scanning, 2 to 3 million points per second LIDAR, as well as taking the 64 megapixel pictures as well. And that took a while. So the whole property, 220 acres, most of that being golf course. I can't remember the exact number of buildings on site, but the steeple in the middle is 150 foot. The hotel is over 100, all clay tile roofs. And I'm proud to say on that, didn't have a single lift, didn't have a single ladder on any of it. And it was very hard, all copper downspouts. This is pretty much one of the hardest of the hard, projects just in terms of substrate material that you could do. Access was really poor, so lifts weren't even an option anyway. Priceless pavers and clay tile roofs all along the property. Hand laid brick because it was built 100 years ago. Things like that. So crew size at one point, James, was actually 23 people on site at one point was the maximum that we had between cleaners, because we also did all of the curbs on the property. We were working behind them laying new asphalt. So they would lay new asphalt and I would have, 5 guys go out there and start cleaning curbs. I think it was like 20,000 linear feet of curbs to clean. And you also have about 4 inches out, of concrete, outside of that curb that you have to clean. Roofs, I want to say, were around 137,000 square feet, and facades were around 100. It was 120 plus thousand square feet of facade cleaning. So the primary force, was cleaning. We had 2 drones there. We had 5 to 6 cleaning rigs there. I would say if I recall correctly, the team that was flying the Alta X and our Centero 6 for the LIDAR and multispectral data, that was a team of 5 to 6 people. And the cleaning team was every bit of 11 to 12 people at that time as well. And then we had a few more crew members walking around with phones and cameras and things like that to capture the lower level facades and courtyards and things like that for the digital twin. So maximum 23, I know that for sure, but concurrently, for the full 12 days, between 10 and 13 personnel there, cleaning, capturing data, things like that. And then we have, our full team of data scientists back at the office who got right on it, did the pre-processing, and things like that.
That's what I was curious about, because and you're doing all this during the day. You guys aren't working at nighttime for these operations, I'm assuming, right?
No, can't work at night there. It's a resort, so there's guests and things there. We last thing we want to do is disturb them. We want to make it appear like we're not there at all, right? The goal is minimum disruption.
Yeah, like if you had to have a small army if you had to have like a lift there, like with traditional methods, how long do you think the cleaning would have taken instead of using what you use for the drones for the power washing?
So I can give an estimation on that. The short answer is it's not possible. Rope access is not possible due to the clay tile roofs and it just being priceless. And there were, we also did 42,000 square feet of pavers as well, cleaning those. So in the courtyard sections and things like that, it's all pavers. You can put wood, you can put mats and things like that down for the lifts to do that, but it's just not ideal. You still risk messing it up. And the 150-foot steeple, there's no lift even big enough to get up there and reach that. There are 150-foot articulating booms, but where you would have to, even be able to, use that from, you have a loading dock, you have a courtyard with pavers, and then you have a large steeple, and the loading dock is slanted, so it's not even level. So they had never cleaned it. They do the ground floor windows every now and then, to keep those nice for guests, mostly interiors, but short answer is not possible. If I had to give you a time frame off the top of my head, if, all of those logistics were organized and it was a perfect case scenario, I'm thinking 4+ weeks easily, because those roofs were absolutely coated. You had lichen on them. So we had to do, 2, 3, 4 coats on some of it. You had sandstone under the window frames, which take a significant amount of care. You can't just coat that stuff in chemicals and, let it be. You have to be very specific with what you're spraying on them, as to not damage that soft stone. So, if it was even possible, I mean, a month plus, which didn't even fit into their time frame. They needed this done ASAP. And, we were in and out as fast as we could. I actually went back there last week And let me tell you guys, I was sitting in that courtyard and wow, it's clean. It's stunning.
Well,
They're very
and
happy
that's
with the
Aero
results.
Velocity's goal, correct? To make jobs that would be 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks long with utilizing different companies into one company utilizing technology, correct?
So that's part of the mission, Christian. The main motto I live by is money is only a marker to the amount of value you provide to your clients. So our goal is to provide value across the board, whether that be more efficient, more, more efficiency with the services that, we're doing, more data points, more insight into the property. One of our mottos we go by is actionable insights from every flight. So, what would traditionally take an inspector a tremendous amount of liability and time to inspect, we can get it fairly quickly with a drone. So that's a whole other thing, is the, safety behind it as well. Um, and I can keep going down that list, but ultimately the short answer is value to the client. Because they had cracks they had cracks between the roof tiles, damaged roof tiles, things like that they would have never noticed. There were leaks going on inside and things like that. They had no idea where they were coming from. We found all of that stuff, diagnosed it for them, and gave them a very nice report at the end so that they can then use that to fill their work orders and get that stuff fixed. And whether it be that or having a clean, presentable building before a golf championship, and everything in between. Those are two very opposite spectrums of service offerings. And we're incorporating drones into all of those things. What would traditionally, and this is the other thing. So I get a lot of questions, and not so much anymore, but especially over the last couple of years of, you're replacing jobs, you're replacing personnel. And some of the cities we work in, we deal with those challenges with unions, and it's tough to navigate. And the answer I like to give on that is we're simply taking the individual that would be on a scaffold and putting them on the ground with a controller, on their hand. It's education. It's education for the client and understanding if our services are a good fit for their property, and it's education for the personnel who would typically be doing it, traditionally, to say, hey, we're not here taking anyone's jobs. We're actually just, increasing their skill level and, you know, making it a heck of a lot safer.
Don, what do you got?
So for the viewers, just so they know, mounting a yellow scan to a free fly Alta X is no walk in the park, by the way. I mean, you made it seem like it is, but it's really not. It's a full process. Can you kind of walk us through like what that process looks like using such a large tool like that?
Yeah, so that is honestly, Don, a little out of my wheelhouse. That's going to be more of an Alan and Seth
Okay.
question. I do know that it takes a while to set it up, and I do know that the batteries do not last very long. They've spent an incredible amount of time on that platform with that payload to do work for the Department of Forestry and Agriculture and things like that, mainly for watershed and dam inspections and things like that. But yes, I have gone into the office and said, "Hey guys, can we go take the Alta X out and fly it? I really want to fly it." And they're like, yeah. It's gonna take a little bit of time. And our aircraft is not the newest one. This aircraft has a tremendous amount of flight time on it. And you know, as much as I wish I was more familiar with it, I'm just simply not, Don. Those guys are the experts in that, but they have spent a tremendous amount of time on it, and I know it's no easy feat, because not only do you have the setup, the actual flights, then the teardown, you have ensuring that the data is up to par and it's what you want, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes you have to go back and do more flights and do more setups and things like that. And then the Centero 6 is a whole nother beast. So that team is very talented. Our team on the TerraVision side doing that, as well as our data scientists, that's definitely more in their wheelhouse. But yeah, I know I made it seem a bit easy, and excuse my ignorance there, but I know it's very difficult and time consuming for them. I wish I could give a more technical breakdown on it, but I simply just don't know, Don.
Well, see, y'all are just keep proving to my point on why I said it's impressive. because it's a lot of little small technical factors coming together at the scale that John, and even with the team, the scale of the team that he was working with, had to do in just 12 days, and not doing nights either, including that. So that just further proves my reaction on the matter, is to do that, and not just to do that, but it's also the knowledge, which kind of leads me to the question of, like, John, like, it's always good to talk to you in person, and and hear your knowledge on the matter. My question is, like, how did you learn throughout the time, as far as for the cleaning side, like building up your knowledge about it? Because, I'm sure, when you talk with clients, it's not necessarily about the technology, but it's about, like, how do we know that, the service on the cleaning side is going to be, to spec, or that as a company, you guys have the expertise to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to get into that. I learned, to keep it short, I learned the hard way. No manuals. At the ground floor level, it was a process of learning to fly these larger, um, you know, heavy lift aircraft, as well as learning from existing cleaners who have been in the business on what to put on what material. And there was still, a lot of unknown for a really long time. Nobody, really cleaned windows correctly with the drones until we kind of came in and said, hey, hard stop, this is how you do it, hot deionized water. Don't just There's no point in cleaning the facade if the windows are going to look worse than when you started, right? So, quality control measures as well, and really just getting out there and working and going, all day and flying the drone, having, a digestible amount of jobs as well, and scaling up. I didn't start on the Coliseum in Mississippi, or any of the 2-lane buildings or anything like that we were doing in that time frame. I started on, house roofs, which we realized very quickly is probably not the most viable thing, because you kind of get chemicals everywhere and people don't like it when you kill their yards. You can have as much neutralizer as you want, but there's only so much you can do. So transitioned into like water towers and storage tanks at that point. So, you know, those vary tremendously in size. So, I could go in the middle of a field and clean a 50-foot tall storage tank that would traditionally take a week, and I did it in about 6 hours, and working up from there, going to the 100-foot water towers in the middle of nowhere with no, struts or supports. I don't know what you would call them, the, little thin line supports in there between the main, legs of it. Doing ones without those, then moving to ones with those, and flying the drone in between them.
Yes.
Incredibly difficult, but I can say, you know, starting off with a digestible amount of work, and really just learning from people that clean, and getting out there and just flying the drone and understanding the dynamics of it and how it reacts when you turn the pressure washer on and turn it off, and you're spraying chemicals through it, and learning proper processes on how to clean it, you know, post job and things like that to keep it running. It was really just kind of, I threw myself in the fire. I started learning, and I realized very quickly there has to be a clearer path forward. And I think that's around the time, we started talking, James. It was like, hey, we need some more education. And it's not perfect yet. It's still, the tech literally gets better every day. I'm looking at the platforms we have, and, even older platforms that are being retrofitted with new components. It's ever changing. The biggest thing was about setting safety standards, and quality control standards, so that at the very least we're running, safe operations for, the personnel there, for the site, and for, any bystanders, as well as ensuring that the jobs actually get done properly. Those are the main things that we've streamlined. Everything else in between, when it comes to, technical stuff like batteries and the components in the drones and the size of the drones and the hoses and everything else, is always, it is a revolving door of development, because one thing can be sufficient, you know, Monday, and then by Friday, our amazing design team has come up with something a little bit better. And it could be something as simple as, hey, we need a strut between the landing gear. So ensuring that the safety and quality control measures are in place initially, at least allows us to get out there and work. And we have to be out there working and doing those things to further, develop the product and service from there. which ultimately helps with the education and individuals getting into this business, whether it be starting their own business or coming out of school as a drone pilot or drone technician, whatever avenue they choose to pick. At least they have a path forward. So learned in fire and forged in fire, pretty much, I think is the best way to put it. And still kind of doing that to a degree. This corporate world is fairly new to me. I went from having my own businesses to being here. So quite a shift. I have a lot more people under me and a lot more responsibility. I'm happy to take that on. Actually, we did a team meeting this morning, and we were at 11 people on staff 6 months ago. We're at 24 now.
Yes.
That's
What
pretty
did
huge. Sorry, Christian, go
what
ahead.
advice would you have, since most of our viewers are students, who are looking, they're just getting started in the UAS space. Some of them want to either work for somebody or, work for themselves. What kind of advice would you give them as somebody who was going to be a doctor, but was like, hey, I enjoy doing this, I'm going to take this leap?
Talk to people, reach out to industry experts, join LinkedIn, reach out to people in the space. Their niches make money. And, if you're curious about pressure washing, you're going to find pressure washing with drones, cleaning with drones. You're going to see my profile. Message me. If you're interested in some of the other services that have, larger vendors and larger support networks, I would even say reach out to vendors as well. Yellow Scan, Frontier Precision, any of these groups that, are even supplying that equipment. They're all very nice. They're all there. Excuse me. They're all there to help. And, one thing I've learned, and this really goes for any business, anything you're in, is create relationships and harbor them, and do not lose them. Stay in contact, at least to some degree. And, if you're not going to, this is some hard lessons I've had to learn. If you're not going to stay in contact, at least come to an understanding, whether it be via disagreement or you just forget, because the two of you are going in, very different directions and very busy. At least communicate that up front before you get off the phone the last time, because, you never know when you're going to need to reach out to that person. And even if it's a once a month call as a catch up, it's worth it. And just do not be scared to reach out to people on LinkedIn, to reach out to industry experts, to reach out to vendors. I would say, compared to the pressure washing industry, I've met a lot of great people there. I've met a lot of snakes there. A lot of people will not give you the correct advice, at times, or try to shift liability and things like that. And you can't always get a clear answer. In the drone space, I've always gotten a clear answer on things, and I've met nothing but good people here. So, there's so many different avenues you can go. And it's not even a case of you have to be interested in this one particular thing. If you just know you want to work in the drone space, reach out to, you want to build them, reach out to an OEM. You want to do a service, reach out to a large service provider. You want to, engineer things, design payloads and things like that. Again, reach out to an OEM for those, and you creating those relationships is at the very least going to get you knowledge up front and could potentially set you up and pave the runway for a potential job in the future. Even if that's not the case, when you're out on a job site and you have a problem with your scanner, it helps to know the vendors you're purchasing from and to create a relationship there. Or with cleaning, if you have a hose bust and you have run through all of your options, it helps to know these vendors and these different people, and shake hands face to face to say, hey, I need this. It's a little different situation rather than, reaching out to them cold or going cold for a long time. So that's the biggest thing is harbor the connections, meet people, and don't be scared to reach out.
Networking is definitely key. I can agree with you there. And, with you being on the tip of the spear, really, especially with, using drones for washing, one of the other questions that I had that curious about is, how, because with drones washing being still a fairly new thing, like how have you convinced, other industries or clients to really kind of take it on or, accept it as a service? Have you run into any challenges? Have you run into any thing where you really had to do some convincing in order to make them kind of adopt it or, take a chance on it, show them the benefits of it, if you will?
Across the board, every day, every single day from the beginning. you know, for, our targets, facility managers, primarily, you want to talk specifically for cleaning, these are guys that have been at the hospital for 35 years, that have been at the college for 40 years. And this is where they went to school. This is where they stayed. This is where they started. And they've either not done it at all or done it one way, or if they're not doing it at all, they know of how it's typically done from their buddies, or, seeing it elsewhere. In terms of traditional methods, it's all about education and finding the right fit. It is not a sales pitch to the client saying, if you are giving a sales pitch, that's probably, that's not the worst thing, but that's for this, specific thing, drone cleaning, that's probably not the right client, because, it's a visual cue. You can see when something needs to be cleaned. The people that are going to take care of that and spend the money on it are going to be getting it done. The people that are not, maybe it's a cost constraint, and doing outbound and getting, new clients is always great. But most, 90% of my business comes from inbound or existing relationships, and that's not because I went and gave this person a sales pitch. That's because, I saw them with a lift pressure washing their, college dorm. And I went up to them and said, "Hey, have you guys seen this? Have you thought about doing this?" Because in all reality, the costs are not tremendously different. The last thing we want to do is dilute the market and take money, and devalue the service. We don't want to replace the person on the lift pressure washing. We want to put a controller in their hands and, show them that there's a new way to do this, because it does end up being faster and slightly cheaper, for the client, which is added value. But it's all, not also understanding that not every building, not every property, not every water tower is going to be a right fit for these services is a big thing as well, because you can weed out, 80% of what you're looking at. If you get a 1-story residential roof, it's like, okay, unless it's just something absolutely crazy, you're probably not going to pursue that and clean it. You're going to forward that to, a cleaning partner and help your buddy who wants to get some work out. But for 100-foot dormitory, yeah, it's probably going to be a little bit faster and a little bit cheaper for you to do that via a drone than it is via a lift, and cheaper across the board, because you're increasing safety, which is ultimately reducing liability. And that's the main education shtick is look, we understand you're doing it this way. We know you want your stuff cleaned. You're already paying to get it cleaned. How can we incorporate with your existing company, or, potentially start new lines of service, to be able to bring this in? Doing demos is very important. For a long time, I didn't particularly like them. I see the value more and more in it now. But at the same time, I'm fortunate enough to have built a big enough portfolio to say, look at what we've done, guys. Whether you want a water tower or your dorm, or the roof on your, large house cleaned, like, we can service that. We're here to do that. And yeah, it's education to understand that, for instance, drone, the biggest pushback point, I would say, James, is Windows. You have a huge divide on that front, because you have guys that use squeegees that have been doing it for 30 years. You have guys that use window poles that have been doing that forever, since the dawn of those. And then you have people doing it with drones. Well, in all reality, for a proper full service application, you need all of those moving pieces in place. You're not going to use the drone to clean the entryway doors to a building. You're going to use a squeegee. You're not going to use the drone on 1, 2, most of the time, even 3-story windows. You're going to use a water fed pole. Everything above that, though, your options are pretty much rope access or a lift. So it's probably a good candidate for the drone, and window condition and all of that stuff. Every situation's nuanced, but, this is the way I like to say it, and I've told you guys this. Getting your windows done traditionally is like sending your car to the detailer. It's not going to be a full restoration. It's going to be about 95% of the way there, but not full 100% restoration. But it's going to take a lot longer, and it's going to be a lot more expensive.
Mhm.
Drone window cleaning is like taking your car through the automatic car wash. You clean the outside of it, you're going to be about 80% of the way there. It's tremendously cheaper. It's a lot faster. And, some of it still has to be done by hand. You pull around to the vacuum, you vacuum it out and things like that, which in this case would be the squeegeeing, right? Or the water fed pole work. But again, it turns projects that would typically be taking weeks to days, and sometimes hours. I've had multiple storage tanks that, they in, Nebraska to the Carolinas, at specifically power generating stations, interestingly enough, was the main audience there. But, these guys were on lift spending 7 days cleaning this stuff. And I went and did it in 6 hours with a drone, and it looks just as good, and stays cleaner actually a little bit longer. And, you know, when we get into products and things like that, there's a lot of different products to use. There's eco products, non-eco products. I love the eco products, but they typically take about 4 to 8 weeks to clean. And it is very hard to sell a client on, hey, pay us to come do this service, and you're not really going to see results until months down the road. So it is constant but simply put, it's, hey, you have fragile materials on your property. I think this would be a better fit. And, this is what I recommend. We can do it both ways, but I have, what I'm trying to recommend up front, which I would say, about 50% of the individuals go with. The other 50% say, no, we want results right now. So it's about staying flexible. Are there standards and ways I would like it to be done across the board all the time? Absolutely. And you see that in Europe with a lot of those regulations and restrictions. It also significantly slows business down. And we're fortunate enough in the US market to have the flexibility, to offer those options to the clients. I like to give clients options, and I like to give deals that are hard to say no to, because especially when I see a project that I'm like, hey, this should really be done this way. Usually I'll give great price breaks just to get in there and show them, hey, look, this is what we're doing. And, ultimately that creates the longer term relationship that we're looking for, which ultimately does lead to more recurring work. And on things like that, again, all comes back to education to the client. But yes, there's pushback every day. There's fighting in between everyone, and people saying, well, it doesn't do as good of a job. Well, no, it's not going to do as good of a job as you squeegeeing it, but it's going to look really good. So
How are you and your team, being business development? How are you and your team reaching out to potential customers and clients to get?
Yeah, of course, Christian. So, like I said, I'm not super outbound heavy. More of what I do personally is inbound. A lot of it's through LinkedIn, actually, and existing client relationships. There are marketing pushes that we will do with work we've done in our portfolio. I would say the biggest thing would definitely be that's kind of driving the outbound is more of the visual marketing. That's helped tremendously, just showing this is what we've done, this is how we did it. And that ultimately leads to more inbound. But I'm building infrastructure right now for mass email campaigns and things like that to really automate the outbound. That's another side of this, right? We're all in technology, we're all in robots, we're all in automation to a degree, and it doesn't change when it comes to the software end. I don't want guys to have to sit there and one person's sole job to be you're only sending emails and replying. I want you to be able to do a little bit more than that, and be able to develop your skills so you're not siloed into one spot. Not a ton of outbound, Christian. Honestly, the infrastructure is there being built, but it's just really not. We're fortunate enough to not have to do a ton of that. The clients are reaching out to us, but visual marketing's been number one for sure, and building personal brands as well, which is another thing I would recommend for students is get on LinkedIn, build your personal brand. It will help.
One of the questions I have is like and it goes more to the skill side of it all. And obviously, you know, a lot, it's not just on the drone side, it's on the application specific side. And, you know, while we teach our students about how to develop drones, how to fly them, how to operate them, like how to manage specific points of a commercial operation, you know, what would you say are skills that you look for specifically when thinking about the applications that you're servicing, like washing, for example?
Good question, James. So a few, you know, kind of surface level things that you know, I think go kind of without saying, but are definitely good to find. You know, individuals who are good at, you know, running interference with clients and being there on site, and who are well spoken. You know, that's a big one. Not always a necessity, but it definitely impresses me, especially when I see young people, you know, having the confidence to get out there and speak with a client and understand when there's, you know, problems, how to communicate that. You know, communication is key, whether it be internally or externally to a client. You know, again, whether it be you're sitting in an office or you're on a job site. So communication is absolutely key. That's a very big one. Work ethic would be another big one. This is not an easy service. You run into problems. You have hoses blow out. You have a lot of little things to manage. Something as small as a hose clamp can literally, you know, or an O-ring be, you know, a significant delay if you're not prepared. So, you know, a strong work ethic as well as strong communication skills with a little bit of technical know-how. It helps. You know, you're going to learn that more hands-on, and I know they learn that in the you know, y'all's program as well. Um, into more technical details, I would say fluid, you know, a basic understanding of fluid dynamics is very important, just because, you know, not every, you're going to be one of your main components. The drone is a tool on the job site. Your main component is going to be your cleaning system on the ground. And you're going to be swapping between hoses of different materials, of different size. And while you can put two identical, you know, identically built cleaning systems side by side, and they're going to look the same, they're not going to perform the same on paper. You know, one pump might be a little bit better, and pump a little bit more than the other one, and it's minute, but it does matter to a degree. One engine is going to be built slightly different than another engine. And the same goes with hoses. You know, say you have a pump, say you have your drone and you hook in a 3/8 hose to it because you want to do a chemical application on a brick facade, and you're curious. You know, the 55-pound rule. You know, you can do 192 feet with that before you hit 55 pounds. That's all great. Well, you know, you still have to, you know, factor in, well, what is my chemical mixture going to actually be? Because how dirty is that facade? Well, chemical that we typically use is 10 to 12 pounds per gallon. You know, water is slightly below that. And depending on the, you know, soilation of that dictates that mix. So you're going to have, you know, that 192 feet can slightly vary. You know, going back from your drone connected to your 3/8 hose, you're going to go into a hose reel. That hose reel typically has a different size hose going from the swivel to the pump, or in the case of a pressure washer and unloader, where you adjust the pressure and things like that. And then you have the hoses going into the pump from the actual tanks. Something as small as having the exact same pumping setup on the trailer, or, you know, the truck mounted setup, you know, for high flow pumps, you know, they can range from having 3/4 inch lines going in and out of those pumps to having as large as 1 1/4. You know, I've seen in some ridiculous cases for like the 30 plus gallon per minute pressure washers, you know, 1.5 to 2+ inch lines, which you're never going to be using something that high a flow with a drone. But pretty much the variance we typically see is between 3/4 inch to 1 1/4, you know, hose size. If you can have the same pump with the minor variances in that, and if you're plumbed in with a 3/8 line going, you know, from the tank to upstream, from the tank to the pump, and then midstream from the pump to the hose reel, you have that with a 3/4 inch line versus that same setup with a 1 inch hose. That's going to significantly change your chemical mixture, your flow rate. how much you're actually spraying out of the drone, which significantly, and by significantly, I'm talking up to 5 to 10 pounds, especially at height, change that weight. Well, that you have to know that, and we've built calculators that are available. Happy to send it if anybody has any specific questions on that. It's a spreadsheet, you can type it in, but it's not perfect for, every application's nuanced. Every single flight is different. So a basic understanding of fluid dynamics and, some basic math skills to go along with that to, really understand what you're getting into, especially when it comes to the pilot staffing service. If you come in, say, to our team and you're going to go fly a drone and hook into someone else's equipment, obviously there's stuff we do preemptively. We get as much information as we can, but when you're there on site, it's a little different story, and this could be the difference of you having to completely switch out the hose sizes and the pumping setup to be able to fulfill this project, because you don't want to go over that 55-pound limit and go over that, 75% max thrust threshold. Sorry. Absolute
that's tough.
mouthful there, but all of it, that's a whole other thing as well on the drone side, right? To say you don't want to be pushing your aircraft past a certain point, because you need to leave a little bit there in terms of voltage and thrust capacity if you run into an emergency situation. Well, your hose size and how much that hose weighs matters, and all of that's dictated by your your ground system that it's tethered to. So with cleaning, that's the hardest thing, because all of those little fittings, all of the way that stuff connects matters. A lot of that stuff is learned in the field, but just having a basic understanding of flow rates is definitely important, to be able to dictate. I have an 11.5 gallon a minute pump. This is, I have 1-inch tubing on the upstream side, 1-inch tubing on the midstream size, and then, half it. And even with these, it gets even crazier, because for the super high flow pumps, 10 plus gallons per minute, coming off of the hose reel, we'll have 1 to 1.25 lines upstream, midstream, and then coming off the hose reel, we'll have 50 foot of 5/8 buffer hose. Then we'll have 50 foot of 1/2 inch buffer hose, and then we'll have the 3/8 hose that the drone actually flies with, and then also the tips as well. What size tip are you using? Understanding the orifice sizes and how that also affects it, in the aeration of the products. Those are all very finely detailed things, but understanding basic flow rates is definitely a big one.
Well, wrapping things up, as a guy who, you said, forged in fire, where do you see the drone industry going in the next 5-10 years?
As a whole, or for any specific service line, big picture or more niche, Christian?
Both. Big picture is what I was asking, but even just within your industry and the industries you work in.
So big picture as a whole, I think that it is only going up in terms of opportunity from here. I think that this year in particular, the industry has gained a lot of traction. It's gained a lot of worldwide attention. And, I think our government is a little more, aligned with the goals of U.S. manufacturers and creating opportunity in that space here, whether it be for service offerings or manufacturing and things like that. I think that job sites as a whole, for a multitude of services, whether it be cleaning, whether it be inspecting, are going to be tremendously safer. I think that, our population as a whole is going to have a higher level of education. Workers that would traditionally be window scrubbers are now going to be drone pilots that understand window scrubbing. And inspectors that would typically walk around and take pictures of something are now going to be drone pilots making, collecting LIDAR data and taking pictures on top of that, and understanding how to pre-process that and get that back to data scientists. I honestly think, based on what I'm seeing, guys, data science and data management is going to be big. It already is. I want to say I read a study last night, and correct me if I'm wrong here, guys, but data brokerage and data sales is nearly as large of an industry and market in the US as our entire food supply here at this point in time. So you have to think about these analytics and these things we're getting, as we do these projects. These are invaluable not only to the client but to insurance companies, to other data brokerages and organizations. Google. I mean, the list goes on and on. And our team of data scientists here have a lot of experience. They're incredibly talented, but data management, data processing, it is, I think, going to be, a very, a very large, in need, in demand, job, right? So, server. Well, I was told by somebody very large in the industry very early on, service providers always make the most money, which makes sense because you're doing the work. But there's a whole back end to that as well. There's a team just as large, if not larger, who actually has to build that deliverable, for them, and then be able to store that and be able to make it easily accessible for the clients and be able to keep up with those things. And as we do these inspections year after year after year, be able to reference each one of them and do the change detection and things like that. So I can tell you, service lines may come and go. They may be, we saw it with drone delivery, right? That I'm not as familiar, but we do have a lot of horseflies and falcons. So I've gotten a bit of the scoop on that. You see a bit of a roller coaster and rockiness in some of these, niche service offerings and sectors, and cleaning's not excluded from that. There may be a point where there's a bit of a regrouping period where we say, if we take a little bit of time and kind of slow things down, that we can make tremendous improvements on the hardware side, you know. But what doesn't change is that there's more data being collected, whether it be data from flight testing, whether it be, you know, making LIDAR point clouds, whether it be making photogrammetry models, whether it be even just organizing it and storing it. That is only going up and up and up and up and up. So while service offerings may, you know, float a little bit and go up and down a little bit, over the next 5-10 years, I can tell you, data management, data science, things like that are not going anywhere. And I think that is something that if you can do it in this industry, you are very well equipped to be flexible, into the future with your career if you ever want to make a change. It's something I'm very interested in. I wish I had more time to learn more about it, but yeah, the data's big. And in terms of cleaning specifically, um, we've come a long way in the short couple of years, and it's an exponential curve. So, we're already kind of hitting that point where we're starting that curve, and then it's only going to go up in terms, and that goes for the hardware, that goes for the service offering itself, that goes for the, chemicals we use, the methods we use. There's a lot of opportunity in that space. I knew nothing about cleaning, 2 years ago. I knew a little bit about drones. Uh, Now I could run a pressure washing store. I could run a pressure washing company. I could do sales on that front, could do it for the drone side as well. So you end up, bridging these industries together not only creates a lot more opportunity in the short term for that niche industry, but it actually equips individuals to say, hey, I've been doing this for 5 years. Maybe I just want to do pressure washing and deal with equipment, whether it be development for, specifically for the drone services, or, I want to do sales. I want to go sell jobs and things like that because I understand it fluidly, so creating, the opportunity initially, and then getting individuals in those seats is very important, but also being equipped to be flexible in your career into the future. I think it's foolish to think you're going to do the same thing for the rest of your life. We all want to do different things. We all want to make pivots, right? And just having that opportunity there and the chance to do that is very important. Obviously retention is a big thing, but it's all about value. And that is how the value is created. It is simply through education and experience.
Exactly. And so that's what we try to do here at SDI, is educate our students about the UAS space, try to get them in there and kind of do what you did and just build themselves up from right from the ground floor to where you're at now. So for our SDI students and just any potential clients that are looking for your service, how do they get in touch with you and Aero Velocity?
It's fairly simple. aerovelocity.com, or probably an even easier route would be to send us a message to the company inbox on LinkedIn. I'm a manager on there, so I will see it. Or send me a message directly, or if you're interested in something aside from cleaning, maybe more interested in the, forestry and agriculture stuff, reach out to Alan. I think a good place to start would be the website, or the LinkedIn page may even be better, because you can see all of our personnel there. If you're interested in data science, John Martell, and the entire data team, send any of us a message. We'll get back to you, and, happy to sit down. I spend a lot of my time talking and educating, clients and individuals just getting started in the industry. So definitely happy to do that.
And so if you're out there and you want more information about our programs here at SDI, go to sdi.edu today, hit request information, go to the course catalog, talk to an admissions rep. John, thank you so much for your time today. It has been enlightening I don't know. Anyway, but just, it's been really cool learning about your story, about how you started out in one thing, built yourself up, and you're a young dude, man, and you have built a huge, huge name in the industry. So congratulations on that. But for Don, Steve, James, I've been Christian. And that's been this episode of The Flight Path. Everybody, way bye.